If there is an owner-occupied one or two family, and as you can see on my screen right now, this is coming directly from the Attorney General's website. As far as New York State and Fair Housing, what is not included and what the exception will apply to, meaning one or two family properties that are occupied by owners, are not required for the acceptance of a voucher. Those rules do not apply. But again, we need to make sure that we are looking at what I am trying to point out. They need to be owner-occupied buildings. These aren't investment buildings that we're talking about that somebody has in their portfolio. These need to be owner-occupied buildings. So if we are being frank, a one-family property that is occupied by an owner, I think that pushes them outside the bounds of being able to rent anything inside of their building legally anyways. A two-family owner-occupied has at least another single unit to rent out. So that's in a situation because it's so intimate and because the owner lives there, that's not something that the law will mandate. That's really the most important exception that we are being confronted with on a regular basis in the boroughs. I mean, otherwise, what we're dealing with are the other exception. We have generally halfway houses where it's for women or battered victims that have been battered, or we have exceptions that pertain to communities, generally 55 and over, 65 and over. That also is an exception in terms of age discrimination or the limitations that are allowed by the state. Other than that, you can imagine that everything much illegal to really refuse based on a particular protected class. And here's some typical examples that the Attorney General writes about, and the Attorney General is one of the sources that you would file, that a complaint would go to against a brokerage or an agent in addition to the Department of State.
Gennady, just give me one more sec to make sure that they hear from me on really best practice from my experience here, not as an attorney. When communicating with the consumer and the consumer says they have a voucher and they're looking for assistance, does this particular person accept vouchers? Guys, the best practice is to say, yes, I'm here to help you. And yes, landlords are to be educated about vouchers, and all landlords should be open to taking and working with vouchers. Remember, the easiest way to just say, hey, yes, I'm here to help, I'm here to educate, and yes, there are minor exceptions to this, but far majority of owners have to take vouchers. A far majority of owners have to take vouchers. Reason being is because if you're going to say something that is out of line, I mean, it's pretty much, there's only, 3 exceptions over here. And I just think that it's, in terms of most of us and how we communicate with consumers, I mean, in most of the housing stock that we've worked with are not halfway houses and things of that sort, as Gennady just described. So, but if there is a two-family owner-occupied place, but let's say it's not a specific building that you're particularly working on, best practice is to say, yes, we're here to help, we're here to educate, and truth be told, you are, guys, you are public servants, you're licensed by the Department of State. So best practice is don't go out there and look at these exceptions, go out and help. And that's really just what and Gennady, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to make sure that agents understand that you're not here to look for the exception, you're here to help. If there's an owner that this applies to, then yeah, then that particular owner, again, according to Gennady and this over here, yes, they might be the exception. But as agents, best practice is to say, hey, help. If you're doing rentals, you're doing rentals. You help everybody, you give everybody equal treatment. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mike. And I'm still going to leave it highlighted here where I put in owner occupied. I think that is going to be, that continues to be the biggest element of this exception that a lot of landlords try to play games with. So don't get into that world of trying to decipher what this means. As far as you know, and like Mike said, I think the best practices are just go along with it and help, and then you deal and educate with the landlord themselves in terms of whether there is an exception for them or not. But I would always side on with caution when coming to or letting a tenant know that there isn't some sort of exception to the particular unit that they're looking at. I would say just go for it, like Mike said, with trying to help them, and then speak to the landlord directly. Um, the most typical types of discrimination and legal actions that generally are seen are literally written right here. Um, what I see a lot these days has to do with social media. And I don't think a lot of agents recognize that whatever it is that they're posting, even if it's for a friend and if they're licensed, they're still on the hook based on these types of guidelines. So I think to kind of summarize, what I'm seeing as the biggest element right now is social media because of the restrictions due to COVID. I think a lot of the investigators are using social media to make these calls and to make these secret shopping experiences brutal for all of us. But just make sure that we are not speaking to anyone or posting anything in any public platform, anything having to do with particular types of tenants or buyers that we are focusing in on. Do not push any type of particular loan on a property as well, because that may also be looked at potentially as a situation. And what do I mean by that? I've seen some situations where a listing would push FHA loans versus conventional. These things are that fine line in terms of what are you trying to put out into the public to facilitate more leads coming into you. And the Department of State looks at it as, well, why are you putting FHA loans in the listing agreement if this is something that can also be accessible to any type of conventional? And then they start looking at whether is this community specific or if this is specific to the listing agent. So don't get into that type of world as well. Landlords are known for threatening behavior. So if you are dealing with situations where a listing that you have on behalf of a landlord is trying to force, and by force I mean, I'm trying to use my verbiage very carefully here. So give me a minute every now and then if I'm thinking to myself to try to put it correctly. Let me give you an example of a situation, I guess, that I am thinking of, and it'll be the easiest way to explain. If you have a landlord that you're working with that is looking for a tenant for their unit, and the landlord is telling you that, well, we're in a particular neighborhood right now, and I don't think our neighbors are going to want any type of different creed, let's say. Please try to focus on this particular type of community to bring in here. And then the landlord says, well, if you do this, I'll give you, 2 months. Or if you don't do this, maybe I won't do anything for you. This is very important because at the end of the day, although it's not in the public, it is out to you. That information is out to you as that public servant. And if you don't do anything with that information, if you do something with that information that will facilitate the landlord's request of you, you're in the same violation as the landlord. And what happens there, you're included in the caption from the Department of State and from any private lawsuits alongside that landlord. So that's very important. Just because it's not being said by you to in the public, if the landlord says something like that to you, use that opportunity to educate right then and there, so to establish that form of abidance with the current rules and regulations.
Gennady, if your presentation allows later on, or you want to talk about it now, co-op boards have very specific financial guidelines in many cases that they share to the public, not to a particular agent necessarily. Say, hey, they have to fill out these applications. You know, same here. Would you say that a co-op board had conversation with an agent? You know, are we under the same guise over here? And actually, I'm being a little silly. I know we're under the same guise. Can you help us out a little bit, because I hear things in the marketplace. Can you share a little bit about what your experience might be with co-op boards?